everyone. I don't think you've met me before because I just arrived. But hi, I'm Lucia, and I'm going to be one of the trainers here. So obviously, I don't know you, and I don't know what level of experience you have, but what I'm going to be talking about is responses and rebuttal. I'm also going to be specifically focusing on how to do responses and rebuttal when you are in separate positions in the debate, because I do think that it can vary quite significantly if you're closing government or if you're opening opposition. The kind of exercises that we're going to be doing is I'm usually going to explain more or less how I think responses should work. Then I'm going to lay out for you an argument, and I'm going to ask you to utilize what I just mentioned as a way to drill holes into the argument. Yes, with everyone? Okay, cool. So first things first, I want to sort of get an idea more or less of what are the things that you are already knowledgeable about in rebuttal, because obviously I don't want to spend half an hour saying things that you all already know. So if we could have a quick roundtable discussion, what are the things that confuse you about responses? What are the things that you would like to improve on, or that you would like tips on how to improve? So what confuses people about rebuttal? Or
what is the most important thing to respond to? Because I find that I spend a little too much time on responding, and then what is strategically the best point to respond to? Is it the most relevant point on their side, or is it something relevant to my argument that I need to respond to?
Okay. Anything else? Okay, that's totally fine. Okay.
The 8 of us are completely beginners, so we don't even know what we don't know.
Okay, that's great. Okay, this is a good start. Okay, so rebuttal. I think rebuttal is obviously incredibly important. I think that it's also something that recently in debating for some reason has disappeared, because as you mentioned, people now are tending to, instead of responding to other people's arguments, just running their own material. I think that's really bad, and the reason for that is because think about if you're judging and I have one argument that one team made and then another argument that the opposite team made, I don't really see which one's more important or which one. If I think both of them are true, it is ultimately up to me as a judge to decide which one I care about more, and you as a team never want to do that because judges sometimes don't know what they're talking about, so you don't want to ever leave it up to them to decide. So responding is super important. So I'm going to talk firstly about the 3 kinds of responses that I think you should be trying to give to every single argument. So broadly, I think that there's 3 things that you can do to take down someone's argument. The first one is you can say that the argument isn't true. So for example, if I am running an argument saying that invading Syria could potentially topple the Assad regime and therefore stop the war and save a lot of lives. If I'm on the other side, I can say invading Syria will not lead to this outcome. Here is why, and therefore your argument is not true and you don't get to the impacts. So that's the first thing, and I think this is quite an important thing to do, because even if you don't manage to disprove the argument, at least in the judge's mind, you're throwing some sort of doubt onto it. So the judge is like, ooh, will it actually topple down the Assad regime? So that's the first thing that you can do for every argument. The second thing is you can take down the analysis of the argument. Oftentimes, when people make arguments, they're sometimes just stating things and they're not really analyzing how it will come to pass. So, for example, in that argument, I can also say, if I make that argument from opening government and I start saying something like, well, if we invade Syria, then we will have more power because, I don't know, the European Union and the United States have more soldiers and more weapons, which means that we would be able to take Assad down, and that means that we would be able to stop the war. I can take down that analysis and be like, look, they haven't explained why it is that invading Syria, yes?
So we are responding by asking them to analyze.
Basically, but you're not asking them exactly, right? Because you don't want to be nice to the other team. You don't want to be like, friend, you missed this.
Okay.
You want to be like, they haven't explained this, which means that their argument doesn't stand right now.
Point at them.
Exactly. You want to point at the judge that this argument isn't well analyzed, and therefore, even if the argument has a powerful impact, like stopping the war in Syria would probably be great, right? Even if it hasn't been fully, because they haven't explained it fully, it means that the argument doesn't stand very well. So you first point out that the argument isn't true. then you go, but also the analysis in this argument is lacking. They haven't explained to you how it is that the United States or the European Union would actually commit that many forces, or even why superior numbers necessarily mean winning the war. The United States had more soldiers and more weapons when they invaded Vietnam, and it still was a really difficult war to win. There is no analytical link between having more power and you being able to actually win a war. So they're not winning this argument at the moment. So it's not true, and the analysis is not well explained. So at that point, if you are a judge, then that argument is pretty like, oh yeah, like, I don't think this is true. I think that the last bit, however, is very important. The third thing that you want to always be doing is explaining why, even if the argument is true, why that team still doesn't win the debate. You always want to have that as like a sort of safety net, because just in case the judges don't believe your responses, I can still believe that even if the argument is true, I don't think that that team is winning. So in that, like, how could we, for example, say that that argument doesn't matter that much?
We can say that is not relevant to the team, to the statement, to the, I don't know, like if they are saying about economy of some country, they are trying to tell something completely different, not about economics, but social affairs of the country. Let's say, will that be a good example?
Yeah, I think that's a good example. So like if someone brings out an economic argument, you can be like, look, this is not the most important argument, because the economy doesn't mean that people are rich, right? Like China is one of the richest countries in the world. That doesn't mean that the people in China are also rich. So sort of it doesn't matter. What matters more is what we are going to explain about how the people on the ground and social issues matter more.
Would it be good to say, like, for example, okay, yes, it affects this area, but there's all of these areas in which it doesn't affect it, or that's not the case?
Yeah, and I think that then the important thing is that you have to do an explanation of why the other areas matter more. So just be like, this area is really small, it doesn't affect that many people, or like, this area has a lot of people, but it's broadly like okay, whereas these other areas, this is where people are really, really suffering, those are the ones that we need to care about more. So an explanation of that. So for example, again, coming back to the example about Syria, in that case, I think that what you could, for example, do is like, even if this argument is true, we still think that we shouldn't invade Syria, because it means that in the future, there's going to be a really, really difficult post-conflict situation. So just because the war stopped, there is no guarantee that there's going to be an end to the violence. Whereas on our side, we're going to explain how it is that we get sort of less violence, less death, and potentially a better conflict resolution if we don't intervene. Yeah.
So basically undermine their argument.
Yeah, so sort of, right? Because from there you're saying like, even if the argument's true, it doesn't really matter that much. So it doesn't matter if you win it. And that means that I think that this is also really useful, because it not only gives you a safety net, but also it forces the other team to explain more things. Because now they have to explain all of those three things again, right? Now they have to be like, here's why my argument is still true. Here is all of like I'm trying to plug in the holes in analysis. Now I need to explain how it is that military power means that I can win wars. And also, I need to explain why this argument actually matters, why it is that I am able to also get a better post-conflict resolution. So do you see kind of like the three prongs that you should try to have for most arguments?
And we don't have to attack their argument at all, it's just enough to say they haven't explained it fully? Is that enough? And then they should explain it more? I think,
yeah, so I think that that's probably the least important of the three, just because it's the one that's easiest to come back from, right? Because then the second, like for example, if you're opening government and you are the second speaker of opening government, and then you go like, opening opposition hasn't explained these two things in the argument, they're not winning, then the second speaker is going to stand up and obviously try to explain those things, right? So he does explain it, or she does explain it, then you're not winning anymore. Because the judge is like, they were presented with a challenge and they overcame it, they're definitely winning now. So I think that doing the other two is more important. Ideally, you want to do all three, I think, because it makes it a lot harder. And once you're like more used to this, it just becomes kind of second nature to be like, three responses to this argument. One, not true. Second, here are the problems with the argument overall. Third, even if, it doesn't matter. it's not that important. So that's the sort of like the three things that we want to be doing in every argument. Do we have any questions on these ones?
How long should our rebuttal last?
Yeah,
so that it's not like half of our.
Yeah. So I think that depends, and that depends on what your position in the debate is. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit later. But ideally, you want to be as time efficient with it as possible. So the last thing that I want to say on this point before I throw the ball over to you guys is I think that structure is super important, particularly when you're doing responses. Because for judges and for audiences, it's quite difficult to track what is happening in the debate sometimes, because it's like, is this a response or is this a new argument? Where does this fit into the whole debate? And given that there's 4 teams, you want to be super explicit to what exactly you are responding and like the 3 things that you have. So you never want to make the judge think that you only have like 1 response. You want to make it super clear that you had 3 and that those were your 3 levels. So you do want to be very clear in sort of like first, I'm going to respond to the first argument that opening government made. 3 responses to this. First response, second response, lastly, even if this argument doesn't, like even if you believe this argument, here's why it doesn't matter. Moving on to their second argument, also 3 responses. You can obviously have more than 3. If you think that there's multiple reasons why an argument isn't true, then you can have 4 responses. 2 why it isn't true, 1 why there's a problem in the analysis, lastly why the even if. And obviously like an argument is just like the best argument you've had in your life and it's like super well analyzed, then you maybe don't want to do the second one. But those are ideally the 3 pieces that you want to have, and you want to make it very clear that you're going through the argument in that structure. Does this make sense so far? Okay, cool. So then what I thought we could do is I'm going to outline an argument, and then I'm going to give you guys some time to sort of try and poke 3 holes into that argument. Yeah? Okay, cool. And then just like share with the group. Alright, so the motion for today's responses is this house would ban cosmetic plastic surgery. Have any of you debated this one?
It was mentioned yesterday, but...
Yeah, this house would ban cosmetic plastic surgery. So say if I want to get like a nose job or a boob job. Okay, so all of you guys are going to be opening opposition on this motion, and I'm opening government. So my first argument is that we should ban cosmetic plastic surgery because I'm going to give you 2 arguments, so you can choose which one to respond. My first argument is that we should ban cosmetic plastic surgery because it is really, really dangerous. So cosmetic plastic surgery has many risks, and a lot of those risks are similar to other operations. You can lose a lot of blood, you can get infected, you can die from cosmetic plastic surgery. And given that it is not something that is necessary, it's just cosmetic, we don't think that we should allow individuals to submit themselves to potentially very deadly consequences. So we should ban it. That's my first argument. My second argument is that we should ban cosmetic plastic surgery because feminism. Because overwhelmingly, it is women who go out and get cosmetic plastic surgery. And they do it because beauty standards make them think that they're not pretty enough, or have breasts that are large enough, or have noses that are pointy enough, or have eyes that are large enough. And therefore, they want to change themselves. And we shouldn't do that, because it means that women are making a coerced decision. They're not deciding for themselves, but rather society is forcing them to go into cosmetic plastic surgery, and that's why we should ban it. Yes? Okay, cool. So then those are my 2 arguments. 1, we should ban it because it's dangerous. 2, we should ban it because feminism. So I'm gonna give you guys like 5 minutes or so to try and like come up with some responses. Ideally, try to use the sort of like three prongs to the argument. Yeah, you can talk to each other if you want.
So, 3 for 1 argument, or 3...
You can respond to both if you think that you have time. If you only want to do 1, you can also just pick 1. Pick whichever one you like the least, or the most.
Okay.
Znači, prvo da je drugo da nije potrebno, kontaš da nije ono već nije potrebno. A treće je kod feminizma, Minjene argumente. Onda je, znači, i ovdje 3
to da je pobjeglo.
A mislim, uvijek može biti opasno, će baš tu osobu zadesiti.
Dobro, pa može za to reći da to su uglavnom doktorice, licencirani su, da biraš pravi doktora.
Mislim, toliko sam znamo to izpravo u svijetu, toliko njih je uspjelo, mali broj koji nije.
Da, i to je isto promijenili su zato u pitanju. Kaj, nijedna analiza nije bila dostatna. Nijedna analiza nije bila dostatna, mislim. I čak i da je točno, to da je opasno, to je samo dakle 2% ili koliko.
So how long can we obose that? For 7 minutes or?
Not for 7 minutes.
Okay.
Ideally try to make them snappy, so like at most a minute.
Okay.
Okay, how are people feeling? Yeah? Okay, let's have, who wants to share their responses? Alright, let's go with blonde lady. What is your name?
Jana.
Okay, well, go for your responses.
First argument, all people should have the right to choose, and it is much more important than the potential risk of operations, because it is the base of democracy, freedom to choose. And second, even though it can have bad consequences, there are very little cases in which there are some bad consequences. So it is important to believe the doctors, because they have degrees and they studied medicine, so that are the same doctors as they are cardiologists or something. If you don't believe the doctors, how could we go to some surgery?
Yeah, okay, I like that. I think both of the responses are pretty good. I think the only thing that I would change is, I think that for the first one, it's clearly like an even if argument, right? It's like, even if it's true that they're super dangerous, freedom of choice is more important, and individuals should be able to choose if they want to put themselves in danger. So I think that you just need to emphasize that this is like an even if argument that you're making. So because I think that the second point that you make is very true, right? The fact that like it's not that dangerous, it's not true. It's a very, very small risk that you're actually engaging in. So even if, so you want to be that first, not dangerous. Second, even if it was, or in the small cases that it is, it's legitimate to make that choice. Does anyone have anything different?
The second argument is better than the first, or?
What? Oh, no, I think both responses are really good. I think that you ideally want to give both, right? You want to, that's the whole sort of like 3 prongs of response. You want to ideally give both, and I think that both of them are pretty good. I think that you just need to emphasize more the like, given that this is a very small minority of cases, in those minority of cases, it still doesn't matter because individuals should be able to choose if they want to opt into danger for the sake of like looking nicer, if that's what they want. Choice is the basis of our democracy, so we think that even if this argument is true for some people, it still doesn't matter that much. Yeah? Okay, who has slightly different responses to this argument that they think they would like to add to this?
Just instead of 3 questions or arguments, can we just make one but that covers every 3 of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Go for it.
So I think people who suffer face deformations or any other kind of accidents or tragedies, they should be able to risk their lives if they're going to do good to themselves, even if they think so. If they will cut them on some psychological aspect or any other. And it's true that plastic surgery are dangerous, but not as much as others, because it in a major part took places on the places of body which are not crucial to our organism. It's mostly aesthetic. There are dangerous parts, but if we took all anesthetic processes, they are practically the same on the regular operations or plastic surgery. So I would say the regular are more dangerous than the plastic ones.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a good sort of additional response that you can make. Yeah?
I just have like one question. Could we like draw a link to, let's say, we want to ban it because it's dangerous in this argument. So we say that by that logic, should we ban anything that's dangerous?
Yes, I think that you can. Yeah. I think that you want to bring certain examples, so like, I don't know, like bungee jumping sounds really dangerous. Like swimming, when it's when it's a very dangerous sea, is also really dangerous. But we allow people to do those things. So we shouldn't ban surgery just because it is. We should prioritize an individual's freedom of choice. Yeah. So I think that's pretty good. Okay, does anyone have any other different things? Yes?
Yes. I think that because of that freedom of choosing, that we are living in the age of information, and when in this age we can get a lot of information about a lot of doctors that are doing these procedures, and I think because of that, plastic surgery is very popular, and we can. There are many doctors, and of course when you have too many of something, there are good things and there are bad things. But if we inform ourselves, we have freedom of information. If we can inform ourselves about doctor reputation and what procedures did he have, we can find a suitable doctor for our operation. And of course, everything that is all our own responsibility. At the end, sure we go. And I would like to about another, because of feminism. I think.
Wait, we'll get into the second argument in a bit. Don't worry. But yeah, I think that's a very good response, and I think that's like adding on to what we previously were saying about like an individual's ability to choose. The most important part of being able to choose is sort of knowing. So if I know the risks, and I still want to do it, then that is my choice, but I am informed. It's not as if doctors are like, you can do this, it'll totally be safe. There's absolutely no danger. They're telling me the information that allows me to decide whether or not I want to. Okay, that's pretty good. Does anyone else have anything else? Yes?
So my points were very similar to the previously mentioned points, but I'd also like to mention that in the analysis, you said that these surgeries can lead to blood loss and infections, but you didn't entirely say how this can lead to long-term health complications or death.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is pretty good. So I think that overall then, we have sort of 4 core responses. So if you were responding to this argument, I think this has the 4 things that you want to say, right? Which are all things that we already said. So firstly, it is not true that it is so dangerous that you will definitely die. In fact, because science is so advanced and doctors study so much, it's actually really, really marginal, the cases in which there is an actual danger. Secondly, you also have the capacity to get informed about the risks, and therefore it's not as if you're going in with a blindfold over your eyes. You know what the risks are, so you're able to make that choice. Secondly, this argument wasn't explained fully because we know that there's a risk of infection, but we can treat it, but there's no link given between getting a nose job and then dying. That is a massive exaggeration. They need to explain this more. And lastly, it's also, even if it's dangerous, that's still not a reason to ban it, because we ban many other things. No, we allow people to do many dangerous things, and we don't ban those. So why should we ban this? We shouldn't, because an individual's freedom of choice is more important than this mini danger that they may be subject to. Also, it's not that important because we think that allowing people who suffer from accidents on their face or who have psychological disorders should be allowed to change their faces, even if it's dangerous, because the harm that comes from them feeling not accepted in society is greater than the potential danger of going under the knife. So that way, you have sort of 3 layers of responses, right? You say the argument isn't true, you say that the analysis is exaggerated, which it is, to be fair, and then you will explain why it's not that important because we value choice more, and we value the ability to help people who have suffered from terrible accidents or who have psychological disorders. Does this sort of make sense then? I think this is a pretty solid response. Very good job, guys. I think that the only thing that I would like to emphasize is that a lot of you do give the responses in a sort of very long paragraph. What you want to do is make it snappy. Judges really love it when you're 3 responses, because then I can just draw bullet points on my page. And then when the deliberation comes and I'm like, why does opening up be like the lady in opening government? And then it's well, they gave 3 fantastic responses to their arguments, and I can immediately look at my notes and be like, here is the 3 reasons why they defeat this argument. So you do want to be going in a first response, not true, second response, analysis is crappy, third response, here is why it doesn't matter that much. But yeah, pretty good job. All right, I'm gonna give you guys another motion now. So we're gonna
do the rest of this one.
Oh yeah, that's true. Second argument. Okay, so now try and do the whole sort of a 3 responses thing. So now the one that you wanted.
Yes.
So why it is that we shouldn't ban cosmetic plastic surgery even if feminism. So response to my argument.
Yes, because what if someone has medical needs for cosmetic surgery? It's not everything about the looks.
Yeah.
And the feminism is emphasizing on the looks, but what if someone has I don't know, a nose that is broken and is not allowing them to breathe properly? So
yeah.
Yes.
Also, we're opposition, right?
Yeah, you're opposition.
Opposition believes that even though there are forced beauty standards on women, which we do concede is true, so banning cosmetic plastic surgery isn't going to solve it. Yes. It's just it's not relevant to this, and it takes away the freedom of choice for people overall.
Okay, anything else people want to say on this? Yeah?
I wanted to say for the point that it's not necessary, it is necessary in some cases. For example, for children, if they have a cleft palate or something, they will have plastic surgery, or if someone has been in a fire, to fix something that may be life-threatening. And also, even if it's not, it's happening every day. So by that logic, we would have to ban eye surgery for people to get rid of their glasses, or other surgeries that are happening, which are also based on cosmetic surgery or in that direction. So if we ban cosmetic surgery, we would also have to ban those kind of surgeries. And even if it was true, why would we not let someone do plastic surgery to increase their confidence?
Yeah, I like that. Okay, does anyone have anything different on this one? Yes, at the back.
I have 2 points. First,
nice.
You didn't analyze it enough. You just said that it's because of that. You didn't explain why, and
Yes.
you didn't give me any statistics and any one of that. And the second one is, they already made it a couple of times, so I'm just going to say freedom of choice.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so then overall, I think that we have 4 responses. So firstly,
Just for that,
yeah,
you don't need statistic in BP format. It doesn't require for you to know 37.5% of population is something.
It will sound more convincing.
Yeah, but
it will back down, back up with some.
It doesn't need to be correct or right, as long as.
Yeah, but if you say, I don't know, in USA there is 70% of black people, that's just
That means there is more
everyone
black
knows
people
that
than white
that's not
people.
true.
Much, but,
Yeah.
Someone can say, how do I know that that's true? How do I know what you're seeing?
so I think that so Veronica's right that you don't always need to demand statistics, right? I think that in this case, for example, I like the sort of like patriarchy means that women feel bad about themselves because we constantly demand them to have impossible beauty standards is relatively sort of straightforward as an argument, and it's a thing that most judges would believe, right? It's like relatively intuitive. So it's not a thing that you require statistics on. I think that the thing that you can say in regards to the analysis is like, look, they didn't explain super clearly.
Psychological analysis.
Yeah, they,
Statistical one.
No, but maybe the statistic you can
Maybe
use.
you should, maybe you should explain from the psychological side the connection between those.
yeah. I think that you can.
just mentioned it. We didn't
Yeah,
explain
exactly.
it in depth.
So rather than demanding statistics, I think that as she was saying, it's important to
so
be like.
statistics are not relevant in this.
Format.
Okay.
No, but
maybe some psychological breakdown and maybe some background to back up these.
Yeah, like how it is that me watching like really pretty actresses on TV all the time necessarily means that I want to get plastic surgery.
Because
Why does it not mean that I do something that's like less extreme, like buy makeup? Like what is the specific link that psychologically means that women go from this to this? Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's necessarily that you need statistics.
I just remembered you have a case, I don't know, in Malaysia there is 10% of Christians. Then you can say something like that if you have a religion motion about banning religion povijest, let's say, history from religion, then you can say, okay, for Christians it doesn't matter in Malaysia because there's only 10% of them, it doesn't have so much impact. U takvim slučajevima možeš to iskoristiti.
So only if it's relevant.
Yeah, only if it's really relevant.
If it's really relevant to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so overall, I think that for this one, then we have 4 responses. So firstly, we don't think that it's true that people or women always do this because of these reasons. There are multiple reasons why people might want to do this, like children who are in fires or people who need surgery because they have broken noses or they have bad skin. It's many other reasons that people engage in plastic surgery. We also think that it's not true that women are forced into doing plastic surgery. Women have the capacity to choose, and if women want to look nicer, then that's a choice that they can make. We don't think that they're being coerced into this. We think that women have brains and have the capacity to think for themselves. If this is something that they want, we're not forcing them into anything, and banning it is very paternalistic, being like, I know what's best for you. Secondly, we also think that even though we all believe that the patriarchy exists, we all know that it does, this woman, Lucia, was very lazy in her analysis. She didn't explain how it is that women go from watching ads about beauty standards and immediately going towards, I want plastic surgery. We think that they need to explain that more for this argument to be true. And lastly, even if this argument is true, it is not true that this is going to solve it. It's not going to fix the fact that beauty standards exist. So at best, what you're doing is making women still feel bad about themselves, but then not giving them the capacity to feel better. And we think that's bad. So we think that this argument is not that important. So then do you see how we have like the 4 sort of like not true, poor analysis, lastly, even if still doesn't matter that much, yeah?
Can we say that even if we had this ban, that it wouldn't be effective, people would still get plastic surgery and therefore make it more dangerous?
Definitely.
They would go to legal places?
Definitely. I think that's a really good even if argument.
Which are more risky.
Yeah, exactly. So for this argument to exist, you have to believe that women are being forced into it, right? That like we're so desperate to fit into beauty standards that we are willing to do this without thinking. So if this argument is true, then banning it doesn't fix anything, because women still want to get plastic surgery, which just means that they're going to do it, but in backward alleys, with unregulated doctors, with people who are not licensed, which is, as you said, more dangerous. So we don't think that we should ban it, even if this argument is true. So then you have two even if reasons for it. So like, doesn't fix the problem. In fact, it makes it worse. So that's really, really good. Yeah, I think those are pretty good. Shall we do like another one? Okay, so I have two motions. We can choose which one we like best. So which one do you guys like best? We have this house would ban the consumption of meat. And this house believes that we should prioritize economic development over saving the environment. Which one do we like best?
Can you repeat?
Yeah. So this house would ban meat, so go vegetarians. Or this house believes that we should prioritize economic development over saving the environment. So we should develop economically, even if it means that we melt the Arctic. Which one do we like best?
Don't forget you're the opposition in this one.
Yeah.
So you're against vegetarians and against and for.
I think the better is second.
The second one?
Easier. Meat, you can find it.
Okay, we can do one for each. Okay, so let's do first the economic growth over saving the environment. So I am evil lady who wants to kill all the polar bears. I say that it's more important to develop economically. So my first argument, and my only argument for this one, is that we should prioritize economic development, because economic development leads to people having money to feed themselves, and that's important. So when we as a country develop economically, we are able to gain more money and gain more jobs, and that allows us to lift people out of poverty. If we prioritize saving the environment, it means that we are leaving all of these people without jobs and without the capacity to lift themselves out of poverty, and that's terrible, because we, as governments of the world, have a duty to people that are already there, and we need to be able to help them and make their quality of life better. So that's why, even if it means that some polar bears die, we should prioritize economic development. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes again. Try and do the sort of like 3 prongs.
To što sam pisao, gledaj zvuči kad sam
Ako ti ljudima jako puno novaca,
točno je, nam treba ekonomski razvoj da ti čovječanstvo živo bude. Sad ti postaje tu duhanje kao avijativna, sad je razumno granica.
drink. We had sauce.
Okay, how are people feeling? Ready? Yeah? Alright, so let's start with the back.
I say that your argument, statement is not true, because if the growth is not limited, we are going to destroy nature, and we need nature to feed yourself.
Yeah, I think that's good. Like, a lot of countries depend on their agriculture, so we destroy the environment, then we're gonna destroy our ability to produce food anyway. Yeah, that's very good. Alright, yes?
Okay, I think if we don't invest in nature, we lose the quality of life. And why we are spending even money to better our quality of life. And if you see from the other angle, why we are all doing the things we do in life, we are trying to create some legacy that we are going to leave to our children. And if we destroy the nature, we are not giving our children anything.
Yeah, so even if we say people now, in the future, they're gonna be screwed. Because there's gonna be nothing. They're gonna have to live underground. It's gonna be terrible. Yeah.
Because the main principle of every man's action is to leave something behind him, be it his name, be it his house or everything else. If we don't leave anything to our children, then all is how do you say?
Lost.
Lost.
Yeah, I think that's good. But I think that you want to focus on like the effect that it will have on the children rather than being like it's about our legacy. Because although it's true, I think it sounds more fluffy, and I can be like, I don't care about anyone's legacy. I care about starving people, and the judge is gonna be like, yeah, like legacy, starving people. So then you can be like, it's about helping people in the future.
It's a little bit more abstract legacy than the reality of hungry people.
Yeah. So I think you go for the sort of more tangible part.
Tangible, yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned how by driving the economic development we are going to create more jobs, but at the same time by destroying the environment we are going to take away many jobs as well.
Yeah.
Also it will lead to poorer nations where usually the agriculture isn't. It's going to make poverty even worse in those areas, and as well, just because we're conserving the nature doesn't mean there's no economic development. It's just going at a slower rate, but overall we think it's going to be better, like in the future, than by just driving the economic development.
Yeah, I like that. Yes.
Okay, the private sector always works for their own interest, so that will not resolve poverty, because in status quo we have much economic developed countries and continents, and still the poverty remains, especially in Africa. And that means that the problem with poverty is not that we didn't develop economics and countries, but the problem with poverty is that some people have too much and the others have too many, because that is not divided equally, and that is not because of economics, but because of the reason that some people want to have all. And the other argument is that if there would be bigger amount of jobs, there would be smaller salaries, and in those sectors people work for low wages, and that also doesn't resolve poverty, because they does not have money to buy food for their children and everything.
Yeah, I like that. Yes.
It is true that we need to invest in economic development, but we can discard the environment, because the environment is in the last of case the supply for our business. Like for example, wood, water, wine, stone, everything else, and if we destroy that, we don't have supply for this business that we're talking to. And even if this theory is true, how long we can live in that life?
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I think that overall, yeah.
So I didn't base it on the environment. I based it on the fact that I don't think it would help significantly. First of all, I don't think you can explain how it would work. I don't think it would work in the capitalistic world that we live in. So poverty, it always exists and it will always exist. So economically, this is similar to what she said. It would only work in a socialistic world, and even if it did work, it would not work significantly enough to change the poverty line, and it would not be worth the catastrophic effects that it would have, for example, on health. So there would be health problems, and then the government would have to invest money in other sectors.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so then overall, I think we have several different responses. So if you were making this argument, or like rather responding to this argument, there's many things that you can say, right? So your responses might look something like, look, firstly, we don't think that this argument is necessarily true. We don't think that it means that we're sacrificing economic development. We can still develop, even if it is at a slower rate. But more importantly, we don't think that prioritizing economic development will be good for jobs, because we are destroying the environment. And poorer countries tend to rely on things like agriculture, on things like fishing, which are dependent on us having an environment. So we don't think that this is going to create more jobs, rather it's going to lose them, because we're no longer available to use the environment around us as a source for businesses and for jobs. Secondly, we also don't think that this argument was very well explained. We don't think that it's true that just because you have economic growth, it necessarily means that you have more jobs. Private companies tend to put their own interests first, and precisely because we live in a capitalist world, we're not able to redistribute wealth, which means that at best, this argument is telling us that we're going to get more money, but that money won't necessarily go to the poor. They're not explaining this well. They need to do that if they want to win this argument. But lastly, even if it is true that we get some economic growth, we think that it's still not worth it, because two things happen. Firstly, it means that in the future, or future generations are going to have worse quality of lives and less availability to find jobs, precisely because we destroy the environment. And we think that we also owe them a duty to have good quality of life. We don't think it's worth sacrificing like the millions of people that will come after us just to lift very, very few people out of poverty and make rich company owners richer. And secondly, it's also, even if it grows the economy, we don't think that it will have a huge effect, because it will create more health problems, and then we're going to have to spend all of that money we just made on other things and other sources of or other like wastes of income in our country, like more money to health services or more money into preventing natural disasters. So we don't think that this argument is worth it. So then you have like a pretty sort of solid three-pronged challenge as like, it's not true, it won't have the effect that we want, there is no link between getting more money and that money necessarily going to people who are poor, and lastly, we don't think it's worth it, even if this argument is true. Cool, so any questions on this? All right, fab. So now, do you see kind of like what I've been doing, which is just sort of like taking down what everyone says and structuring it into like three prongs of response? So now, for this one, I want you guys to do it. So take notes of what other people say if you think that it's a good response, and then you can share with the group sort of like what everyone said, structured into three responses. Okay, so for this one, we're gonna go with the ban meat one. So I am in favor of banning the consumption of meat. I think that we should all be vegetarians. My reason for it is I think that we should prevent animal cruelty. Currently, in the meat industry, it is very, 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 very painful for animals, because we have so much demand for meat that we keep them under really horrible conditions. Chickens can't move around, we inject them full of steroids so they can't even lift themselves up, we treat them really horribly, we slaughter them. So overall, the quality of life of these animals is horrifying, and it is terrible that we try to get more meat even though we don't need it, because we could get food from other sources. So overall, the huge cruelty that we inflict upon animals is not a thing that should happen, because animals can also feel things, they also have feelings, they have thoughts, they are living beings. Therefore, we should ban meat because cruelty against animals is not morally permissible, and we can get food from other places. So, I'm gonna give you again a couple of minutes to think of responses, and then just remember to like keep jotting down what other people say, so you can like give me a full three-pronged response. You are pro eating meat.
Mislim da damo za ili protiv?
Za.
Aha, damo za.
Za meso.
Ne.
Za meso.
Ili
mi smo za meso.
Da. Vi ste za meso,
Ja.
stavljate isto.
Mi smo da ne benari meso.
Mi smo da jede meso, a oni bi zabranili.
This house would ban meat. So that means that we are opposite of that.
We want to ban it.
They
No, we
don't
don't
want
want
to.
to ban it.
I want to ban it. I want to ban it because
We don't.
yeah, you don't. You say we should keep eating meat.
Yes.
I think we should ban it because of animal cruelty. I mean, I really like meat.
Me too.
I think that it makes me probably like a morally inferior human to like a yeah who's vegetarian, but I really like meat.
Yes.
It's just hard to sort of like conciliate with my moral principles.
It's hard sometimes, but taste is taste.
Okay, how are people feeling? Yes?
Instead of saying the analysis is incomplete, can you just say the analysis is wrong?
Yeah.
I think, are we going to debate or we're done?
Yeah, let's give it like a few more
Okay.
seconds. Yeah. Okay, so let's start collecting some responses. We are gonna do the sort of like at the end the collating of them, and I want you guys, if you do it, to be like, here is my 4 responses, 1, 2, 3, 4, or like however many you find, doesn't matter how many. All right, so who wants to defend meat eaters first? Okay, yes? Yeah, you.
Yes,
Yeah.
you are talking about keeping the meat.
Yeah.
Yeah, you start.
So my reason for eating meat is because in meat there is a lot of vitamins that who are necessary for normal body working, and you can find them in another food. So you need to take some some tablets of supplement who is not normal and not good for our another like kidneys. So I think you need to buy B vitamin for eating. If you don't eat the meat, you need to buy extra vitamin.
Yeah.
So it's a tablet. It's not good for us.
Yeah.
So
what I was saying earlier about how you can't just eat something else is not true, right? Meat is very unique in the vitamins and proteins that it gives us. Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Who else has something?
I have a question.
Okay.
So when we are listening to our colleagues, do we are opposing them, so we are taking your side, or we are just extensions of what they have said? And
no. When you're joining them together. So, for example, that is one response. That's one response that says the argument isn't true. But what I want is, I want someone to be able to give me the 3 different ones. So I want someone to be like, first, this is not true. It is not true that we can get meat from other sources. Second, the analysis is false for whatever reason. And lastly, even if it's true, it doesn't matter. So like join all the responses that we come up together as a group into one full sort of like a bam, take down response. Do you have something?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
So I don't know if it's good, but so animal cruelty doesn't occur everywhere and every time because there are a lot of farms that care about the well-being of the animals. Also, the human digestive system is configured in a way that it demands animal protein. So, like colleague said, it needs amino acids from the animals, and as well, it is true that vegetarianism could be healthy, but it still doesn't exclude the animal cruelty because vegetarians consume eggs and milk and etc., which they still need the animals to produce them.
I like that. Those are already 3 very strong responses as to like, it is not true, we still need to eat meat because it has essential amino acids. Vegetarianism can also be full of cruelty, and also it's not true that every farm treats animals badly. So if anything, what we should do is like regulate farms rather than ban all meat. Okay, yeah, I like those 3. Okay, who else has something? Yes.
About that animal suffer, there is a way that you can stop animals from suffer, and about if we don't eat meat, then we would eat vegetables, plants, or some sort of, but plants are like meat too, so then if we eat that, then we are killing ended life, so this theory can drop off.
Yeah.
And what about the restaurants? There are lots of business, and about farms, there are lots of people who work there, they will lose their jobs. So half of people on earth would lose their jobs because, I don't know how, but lots of people would lose their jobs because the farm is their privileged job. And
So question for you on this one. I think it's a good argument, but I want you to go a bit further in the analysis. So why do those people matter more than like the cows?
Can you repeat?
Why do those people who would lose their jobs matter more? Why are they more important than the cows or the chickens or whatever? Why are humans more important than animals?
Because
I know. It's like a very sort of like thing we take for granted, but I think that you can do it.
Can I connect this with religion? In Christianity, God told people that He gave us food, animals and plants for the food. So
you could, but what if I'm not Christian?
Make us higher than
I think you can skip the religion aspect and go to the last bit immediately and just go like, there is a difference. Humans have much more advanced thought.
And we are
can we say like what's then by that analogy what's the difference between animals and plants?
Yeah, you can say that, but I think that the easiest way to get at it is just like, no, humans are different. We think more, we feel more. We are the most advanced animal on the planet. If you had to choose between killing a puppy or killing a human being, those lives are not equivalent. The child or the human that you're saving does matter more because it has like higher thought. Okay, who else has more things to say? Oh yeah?
Also, could we draw a comparison to the fact that just because we would not like kill those animals, they are still natural predators and prey in the wilderness.
It is a food chain, yes. We're part of a food chain.
We're on the top of the food chain. It's like, even though if we just don't do that.
Yeah, it's natural.
Yeah, it's natural.
Lions eat whatever it is that lions eat.
Animals,
Yeah.
I have three things I will have to. I will face this that what colleague has said that if you have a proper farm and all point of slaughtering is for the animal to not feel the fear at first and then not to pain. And the second, I would like to say that production of meat is essential because of food reserves. If we don't, all humanity will cease to exist if we don't have enough food. And it would make a lot of time and money to transfer those animal farms to vegetable farms. So it will take a lot of time and money to change between that, and a lot of people could die in between that moment because of starving.
And we value humans more than animals.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I like that. Who else has something? Yes.
Should I do like a complete summary?
If you want to do a complete summary, we can go to that in a bit.
Okay, or just, okay, so first is animal cruelty, that no, that not all animals are treated cruelly, the regulations change every year, and no, the system is not perfect, but again, I don't think that this will fix the problem. I think it will make it worse because I think that people would go to other places to get meat. And then, okay, food from other sources, that these certain minerals and amino acids are vital, especially for children in development.
Yeah.
So maybe for grown-ups, these certain amino acids aren't as important, but for children in development, they are crucial. And then food from other sources, it can be difficult to get them, and supplements are fine, but they're not perfect, and they're also more expensive, and not everyone can afford supplements, and they're expensive to make and to bring and to buy. And then didn't explain exactly why meat is so bad, and where would all these animals go that we have now? I mean, there are like billions of animals in the food production right now. What would we do with all of these animals? Do we slaughter all of them? Do we put them to sleep? Do we just let them out in the field? And the economy would suffer, and also with everyone being vegetarian, it's not sustainable. There's literally not enough land to grow that much food.
Yeah.
And then another thing, even if you could do this, I don't think it would be effective, and also not everyone can be a vegetarian. There's people who are allergic to legumes, for example, so that's a huge protein source for vegetarians that they can't eat, or other things.
Yeah. Okay, good. Anyone else have anything different? Okay.
Oh, and where do you limit, like, if you limit the consumption of meat based on the fact that it's animal cruelty, then there's also lab experiments, which are also animal cruelty. Like, where do you draw the line that humans are more important?
Yeah. Okay. I like all of those. I think that if anything, you have almost too many.
Okay.
But that's good. Okay. So now I'm gonna give you guys some time. So now think about all of the answers to the argument that we're given. Pick your favorite ones and come up with sort of like a full sort of, here are the X number of responses that I have. Try to attack sort of like the claim, then the analysis, and then the even if it's true, here's why it doesn't matter that much.
So now we are taking our side, or?
No. You're still on that side. You just want to bring together all the responses. So, for example, on this one, I would say that claims that say that like it's not that bad. We can have farms that are nice to animals. That's a better way of fixing the problem. Also, we need to eat meat. It's not true that we can replace it with something else. Those are like attacking the idea of the argument being true. Then you can attack the analysis. And then you can say that like even if it's still not as important because human jobs matter more because, yeah, so those are sort of like claims that go towards it, even if this argument is true, it doesn't matter that much. Cool, so bring it all together. Pick your favorite ones.
Zašto ovaj nije uspija do kraja lijepo objasniti?
Samo skrati to sve što smo rekli i...
Okay, who wants to take a stab at it?
The shortest.
You? Go for it.
The people are over animals and we need food. So.
No! There needs to be more than just one response. Okay, so someone wants to do more than just one. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so first, animal cruelty. I don't think that's true everywhere. The regulations are changing every year. No, they're not perfect everywhere, but I don't think that banning the consumption of meat would fix the problem. In any case, it would make it worse. And I think there's other ways like we could improve regulations that would be a better solution than banning the consumption of meat. Then food from other sources, so it's very difficult to get. I don't think it's true that you can get all the vitamins and minerals from other sources, especially for children in development. Yes, you can get supplements, but they are expensive, they aren't perfect, and it's not a solution to the problem of not getting those amino acids. Also, you can explain why meat is bad, and then even if we ban the consumption of meat, I don't think that would work, because first of all, what would you do with all the animals? The economy would suffer. It's not a sustainable way of providing food for billions of people, and also it doesn't work for every person. There's a lot of people who can't be vegetarian.
Yeah, that's good, nice. Okay, I think that was excellent. That's sort of like what we want to aspire to. That was really good. It's sort of like attacks to the claim, also analysis, lastly, even if it doesn't matter. That was really good. The one thing that I will say about it is I want you to stop saying sort of like, I think that's not true. It's not true. You're super certain. It is not true that this works for everyone. It is not true that all farms are cruel and horrible to their animals. So just sound more certain. But overall, that was really, really good. At the back, we had another one. Okay, that's fine, that's fine. It was very good, it was very good. So yeah, no, so that's really good. And overall, that's sort of like what we want. So hopefully this was relatively useful. So for the last sort of like 10 minutes, I'm just gonna chat a little bit about how you want to change the way that you deal with arguments depending on your position on the debate. So this is just gonna be me chatting for a bit. So obviously you guys are familiar with like the 4 positions, right? So like opening up government, opening opposition, closing government, and closing opposition. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the first 2 teams, opening government and opening opposition. So in opening government, obviously you only have one speech to respond. So I think that that means that overall, you want most of your material to come out in your first speech, and you want your second speaker to do really, really heavy rebuttal and destructive material, because you only have one speech to respond, and ideally, you want to make it so difficult from opening opposition to win that the next speaker just isn't able to bring it back. So I would say that from deputy, so the second speaker of opening government, you want to spend most of your time responding. You probably want to spend about 5 minutes responding, maybe 4, and you want to spend the last few minutes going back to your own material and explaining why it still matters and why it is still really, really relevant. The reason for that is because, like, obviously the other team can come back and explain why the arguments are better, but you also want to bring back your case and remind the judges that it matters a lot. The way that I think that you can integrate that in rebuttal is in the last bit that we talked about, the third prong, when you are like, even if we don't think this argument is as important, we think that what we should value more is my own argument, because my own argument is more important, and then you explain why. So for example, in the case of animal meat, if you had an argument that talked about how it would lead to lots of people not having any jobs or not being able to feed themselves because we don't have enough land to grow all of the vegetables, then you can make an argument about that. So when you're doing responses, you can start to integrate your own case into it by being like, even if this argument about animal cruelty is true, it doesn't matter that much, because we think that the starvation of people who are no longer able to get food, as my partner told you in her previous speech, is more important, because human beings should matter more than animals because of reasons. So that's where you want to start integrating your case. So I think that ideally, in deputy, you want to start integrating your own arguments into responses. I think it makes it easier to win. So yeah, you want to spend like 5 minutes responding more or less, and then 2 minutes talking about your own case, why it matters, why it's very important. In those bits, what you want to specifically be doing is responding to criticisms that the other side made. Because obviously, if the other side is doing what we have been doing, which is just being like, you didn't analyze this, it is not true that you said that, then you need to respond to that for your argument to be able to win. So in the last sort of 3 to 2 minutes of your speech, you want to go over like, let's go over my first argument, what did we tell you? The response was this, here is why my argument is true, or let me fill in this gap in analysis. So in deputy, you ideally want to be doing those 2 things. So first, very aggressive rebuttal. Second, responding to the claims that the other side makes. And precisely because you don't have that much time, you want to be integrating your responses and your arguments. Okay, any questions on opening government? Okay, so opening opposition. I think opening opposition is the best position in the debate. I love it. I have one of my best friends in debate. She calls opening opposition smashy smashy, because she says it's just the easiest place to win. You don't have to even prove anything. You can just be like, you are wrong. So I think that's the beauty in opening opposition. You have so much time to respond. So the first speaker in opening opposition, obviously, you have to still get a case out, right? Because you still have arguments. So I would advise you guys, because I sometimes do this when I'm the first speaker in opening up. I spend too much time doing responses, and then I'm like, oh no, I have like 3 minutes left to go through like my 4 arguments. That was a bad idea. So you ideally want to spend probably like 2 to 3 minutes max on responses, and the rest of the time in getting your case out. Then, as the second speaker of opening up, you can generally just like go to town in opening government and be like 7 responses. But ideally, you do want to have like a constructive speaker first, and then a very destructive second speaker. So again, kind of the same as in opening government, you want to spend more or less like 5 minutes doing responses, and then like 2 minutes building back your own case and explaining why it matters.
And then at the end, we refer to their case.
Yeah. So that's more or less the top half, which I think is relatively like straightforward. Just have a constructive first speaker and then have a very destructive second speaker, but don't forget to still bring back your arguments and respond to the criticisms that the other side made to them. Yeah? Okay, so then the bottom houses, and this is where things get a bit weird. So closing government, I think it's a really tricky position, and it's quite difficult in debates, because you only have one speech to respond to what closing opposition says. So if you think about it, there's like, you have listened to the entirety of top half, and then as the extension speaker, you get to respond to opening up. But you have no idea what closing opposition is going to say, just no idea. So that makes it quite challenging if you're the whip speaker. On the converse, it does mean that if you're the extension speaker, it's quite nice because you get to respond to just one team. So I think that overall, as extension, again, your role is mostly to get out your own argument. So I would say that at most, you also want to spend like 2 to 3 minutes responding to opening up, because your whip speaker is going to be able to really do that. So 2 to 3 minutes on responses, and then your extension. And that's where it gets a bit challenging for the whip speaker in closing government, because you are, functionally, the only speaker in the debate that gets to respond to the closing opposition extension. But also, you have to respond to opening opposition. I think that the easiest way to do that is to, when you're taking the notes for your speech, legitimately just leave yourself like 2 sheets of paper or like 1 sheet of paper completely empty, and just while the other person is giving their extension, just write responses to it, so that you can have like a set part of your speech ready to take down closing opposition. This is the bit that I sometimes find quite hard, that like I'm whipping and I plan my whole speech, and then closing opposition gives an extension, and it's like a super weird extension, and I'm like, this doesn't fit with anything that I'm saying at all. And then I don't respond to it, right? So I think that that's what you want to avoid. So ideally, you want to leave space in your notes so that you can just be like, okay, closing opposition extension, here we go. Note down their extension, note down responses to it. And then when you're giving your whip, you can be like, first thing, let's respond to closing opposition and what they brought today in the debate. I think that in closing opposition, therefore, so in closing government, what you most want to do and what you most want to prioritize is responding to closing opposition as the whip speaker. Then after that, you obviously like respond to opening opposition, but you have a bit more leeway on that because your extension is out, because your extension speaker already responded. But the most important thing that you want to do is to respond to closing opposition. So yeah, any questions on closing government?
And then at the end, bring our argument.
Yeah.
Or reinforce our argument.
Yeah. So I think it depends. It depends on how you structure your whips. But yeah, ideally, if you're doing sort of like team by team, you want to do sort of like, first, responses to closing opposition. Second, let's talk about other things that the opposition has said in this debate. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about my own extension and why it's the most important material in this whole debate. My extension is amazing. So that way you have sort of like already taken down the closing up, taken down the opening up, and whipped your own extension, so that hopefully will take you over your opening.
And what is the best way to respond to, for example, opening government without backstabbing them? So
I think that the best way is to be like a bit shady. Just
well, ours is better.
Yeah,
we explained it better.
So the way that you want to do it is, I think that you want to be sort of like, look, we totally agree with opening government, but we just think that some things are more important. Because, so for example, if in the, I don't know, like in banning meat, let's say that opening government just talked about how meat is really disgusting and how it's not tasty and that's why we should ban it. And then you talk about animal cruelty. So obviously you want to be like, look, we totally agree with opening government that meat is not that tasty and we'd rather eat like eggplant all day, every day.
Nice.
However, we think that the most important thing in this debate is the suffering of animals, because taste is nothing compared to the horrors that cows and chickens face every day in animal farms. So that's the most important thing. So you're still being like, you did a good job opening government, but we did a better one. Another way to sort of do it is to respond to them implicitly. So just be like, look, we think that opening government made a really good argument. However, we don't think that their argument applies in certain circumstances. In fact, it applies to very, very few people.
Whereas
our argument applies to everyone. So that way you're sort of like, you're being like, what a great argument. So sad that it only applies to a small group of people. Our argument, on the other hand, so you're still sort of like being like, here is a potential response to the argument. Our argument doesn't have that problem. So you're sort of like throwing shade, but while still being good argument, OG, good job. So yeah, so that's what you ideally want to do. So I would say you probably want to spend like 2 to 3 minutes on responding to CO, 2 to 3 minutes on responding to OO, and then 2 minutes or so on whipping your own extension.
You're short on time. So.
Yeah, so last one, closing opposition in like a minute. So closing opposition, I think, is very easy and very comfortable. The only thing that I would say in closing opposition is that if you're a member of government, if you're a whip speaker, it's the same, right? If you're a member of government, it's quite hard because you have two teams to respond to. You have to respond to opening government and you have to respond to the closing government extension. So I think that the most important thing on member of opposition is to be aware that you can't respond to everything, so don't attempt to respond to everything. Instead, just prioritize and still make it a hard limit that you only have 3 minutes for responses, and trust that your whip speaker is going to be able to take down opening government and closing government. So that's, I think, the most important thing. And the whip is pretty much the same as what we already talked about.
So the whipping, closing opposition, I can respond to everything.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the same, right? You respond to opening government, closing government, you whip your own extension. You just don't want your member to spend all of their time responding, and then it's like, oh, I have like 3 minutes for my extension now, this is terrible. Yeah, but that's all, I think, depending on position. Hope you found this useful, and I think it's lunch now. Just, I think, be back at